Graham Wheelock, you are up next. Hello.
I think I called in like a month ago, so
Okay.
come in a feature. But yeah, we have a 2-5 hand out of Southern Indiana.
Okay. That's a Harris or something?
It's a Caesars.
Caesars. 2-5 Southern Indiana. That is not, I have not played there.
You're not missing out.
No? This is a 1K cap as
No,
well, or what?
it's 1K cap, but match half, so it
Oh,
plays
nice.
a little bigger sometimes. This was the must move, so no huge stacks over here. But there's me and then like two other pretty good regs at this table, so
Okay.
pretty reggy.
Okay.
We're 1.1 effective for this hand.
Okay.
So to start, we're eight-handed under the gun. Eight opens to 20, which is his usual open size. He's probably the best player in the room.
Okay.
The low jack calls, who's just a recreational. I'm in a cutoff with king of spades, queen of diamonds, and I just flat, but I've heard arguments both ways here.
King of spades, queen of diamonds.
Yep, king, queen off.
So under the gun to 20, low jack calls, hero in the cutoff with king, queen off. Another one of these ones that's probably pretty close in terms of like dealing. I mean, there are some, there's certainly some guys where opening from early, like under the gun for king, queen off is just a fold, right? Especially, the closer you are. Like if you're +1, it definitely leans more towards a fold. And in this particular spot, you're in the cutoff. And again, I sort of go back to this whole thing where, like, if you're on the button, I mean, I do open this hand live. I think not opening ace jack off and king queen off in live games, especially when someone's usually walking, which makes the game eight-handed, which, funny enough, this is your setup, right? It's eight-handed, is a little bit on the nittier side. Is it an egregious mistake here to overflat in the cutoff? I don't think so. I think if you have confidence in your post-flop game, it's interesting because you go back to the last call and it's like the last call that we had on the live stream was a guy that was in a similar situation with ace jack off, facing a raise from mid position, but not from early position. He decided to 3-bet the cutoff. And
Yeah, and this is interesting because there's a call between. So,
yeah,
like,
there's a
if there
call
was no
between,
call between, I just fold.
so you want to call because there's a call between? Because this gives you more incentivized to 3-bet because there's more dead money out there.
Yeah, but my logic is well, first of all, the button is pretty passive, so I'm not really going to get squeezed very often. And then second, if I do 3-bet, I think it could respond by getting the good player to call and then getting the low jack who's not as good to fold. Or even worse, if the under the gun player 4-bets and I have to fold
Well,
out my equity.
I think that is a consideration more so than the first thing you said. I think if it induces some sort of 4-bet bluff and blows you off your equity, that's a problem. But I will disagree with you. I would much rather call here heads up with no one calling between than calling here multi-way. I'm not saying that it's necessarily I would just rather be in a situation where no one called in between. And the reason why that is because, again, with multi-way responsibility post-flop, you just can continue on more often versus a C-bet if it's heads up than if it's multi-way and someone else calls. You know what I'm saying? Like, you just cannot, you don't realize your equity quite as much when it's multi-way in a situation like this. But what I was going back to from the first call is it was a 3-bet pot. It was sort of an extreme situation where the guy didn't value bet ace jack. If you are going to be playing some of these hands on the cusp, you have to play them as best as they possibly can post-flop, which is like squeezing out thin value, recognizing the times to bluff, not just playing automatic. That's why sometimes I'm comfortable coming in with these cuspy types of holdings here. Sometimes bluff catching properly too, where you play a massive pot with one pair correctly. So it can go the other way too, where someone calls with king queen and then folds the best hand somehow when they shouldn't. But anyways, okay, so you overcall here in the cutoff with king queen, and then what happens?
Yeah, so I overcall the button calls, who's pretty passive, like I said, and both the blinds fold, which is good because there's a good reg in the big blind. So
So one,
Um,
2, 3, 4, right? Four
yeah,
ways, 80
four-way
bucks.
pot. We got 80 in the middle. Yep.
So people, well, Nate Schmidt saying, in an optimal sense, and I assume that, uh, obviously Solve for Live, Nate has done, these pre-flop live no locking ranges, and it wouldn't surprise me if King Queen just a fold to an under the gun open, and I think that's usually probably right. One of the things that I will say is that people that just say when they look at a chart or they look at some sort of pre-flop setup and they just say, oh, it's just a fold. It's just a pure fold, like in live play, or it's just a pure call. Okay, that's fine, but it's not necessarily always the best way to play it. I just think that sometimes people have like a little bit of a hitch where they look at a chart and they say, this is what's supposed to be done in this situation, therefore I do it. It's not a bad approach to clean up pre-flop, and a lot of this game is sort of pre-flop. But I don't look to a chart to just say, oh, all of a sudden the chart's 100% correct, blah 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 in a given situation. Especially when you're looking at quote unquote optimal ranges. Now, the solve for live charts are not optimal ranges; they are ranges that Nate has sort of plugged in where he thinks that people might play certain hands that are suboptimal in certain situations. But okay, so $80 now, four ways. Okay,
Yep.
right?
And so to the flop, we get Queen of Hearts, Jack of Clubs, Five of Hearts.
Okay, so Queen, Jack, 5. You have King, Queen, top pair. Okay,
Yep. So the opener checks, the low
okay.
jack checks, and so it's kind of my kind of second decision point of the hand to bet small, bet big, or check here.
I mean, in most typical games that aren't some sort of ridiculously tough, like at a 2-5 game, like if you put me in a Southern Indiana game, no offense to that room, certainly 2-5 at Chasers, if I'm in there with King Queen in this setup, I'm betting here a lot. I mean, it is something that like your hand doesn't need that much protection. I just don't see a whole lot of people checking a ton of overpairs here or ace queen. And you're going to get calls from ace king, ace 10, things like that. Sometimes like a jack. So I would be betting quite frequently here.
Yeah, I agreed with you. I said the guy under the gun is, probably the strongest player in the room, but even then, I have to wonder if he's taking, a hand like a hand like aces or a hand like queen jack or fives. I'm almost, positive he just goes ahead and starts a bet with that.
Yeah, I mean, there
Um,
are certainly some guys that will check with sort of like relevance to the board, like kings or aces, but and that's why you would check back here some of the time with king queen. But like I said, if you sort of live note log that's not really happening, you've got the best hand here a lot, so it gets checked over to you. Okay,
yep. So I go 65, button calls next to act, opener calls, and then the low jack folds.
so here goes 65 button calls, UTG calls, and then fold.
Yep.
Okay, that's interesting. So, what do you think the UTG has here? Do you think that it's possibly viable that he might have some ace king, ace 10, something like that doesn't start a C bet into three other opponents?
Definitely. I could also see some like wheel nut flush draws, check calling here with the front door hearts.
Okay, like a hand like or even like ace 7 a heart. I mean, yeah, I mean this is a good example of I did 30 more um, definition of terms for our ongoing article. There's a bunch that are done over in the CLP on the website and in articles like definition of terms. One of the terms that I defined was like dry flush draw. People are like, what's a dry flush draw? Dry flush draw, of course, is like a flush draw that doesn't really have anything else going on with it. Sometimes you could consider a hand like ace 7 of hearts here a dry flush draw. Obviously, it's not dry against Graham's hand because, an ace would be good, but it's an example of a hand that you might check three ways, right? Like the nut flush draw. Usually not a combo draw, but like ace 8 of hearts, ace 7 of hearts, something like that. Okay. 275 to the turn.
Turn is about as big of a brick as it comes to a diamond.
Okay.
And so the opener once again checks to me. Um, and so because the button, so it's kind of an interesting spot here because the button was really passive. And so I thought there was a lot of benefit to try and make a big bet here and kind of put some pressure on his, like, I don't know, Jack 10, potential heart draw hands, putting him in the middle between me and the opener. So I go 225.
So you actually bet on the large side here into three people,
And yeah, into two other
into two
people. Yeah.
people with three people in the hand. Um, yeah, I mean, I think I don't hate it because you said the button was passive?
Yeah, button's pretty passive. If I had to profile the under the gun player, it'd be like between a tag and a lag.
I mean, the only thing I'm trying to think about, so I was just trying to figure out how often the button's in here with like ace queen as an overcall, right? And queen jack obviously has you beat, but it wasn't raised off. And now maybe obviously the button wakes up here with a hand. Does the button call here again with queen 10? I wonder if I would go small here and go 125. And because once you start go bet, now obviously, I mean, I suppose you could have front door hearts here too, but if I never want to get somebody to fold out queen 10 here, sort of next to act, and it kind of puts some jack X hands like in a little bit of a spot. People are saying in the live chat, like, would the under the gun always bet off with like jack X of hearts? I actually think that having middle pair and a flush draw here, like if he had king jack of hearts, jack 10 of hearts, something like that, I would actually do a lot of checking with that hand because the reason why is you're not getting a queen to fold, and you have, especially if you had like ace jack of hearts, you're not getting a queen to fold. So you really have like the second best possible hand, and you've got the nut draw. Just to go back to that really quick. So actually, I don't know if I'd go this large here, Graham.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And kind of my idea was that I wanted, and I played this hand a while ago, so forgive me if I'm not quite
Mm-hmm.
remembering. But the button may not have had the full 1K. So my idea was like the button may have been shorter at like 700 or 800. And so if the button wakes up here and just puts it in, I'm folding.
Mm-hmm.
But if the button folds and under the gun either calls or jams, just because it's a player who I respect enough, who I think could have like the king 10 of hearts, the 10-9 of hearts, jack X of hearts, hands like that.
Yeah, the board is
Could
quite dry
potentially just
heavy.
go for the check jam. So I mean that's my logic, because I have a different plan based on how the hand develops, and I think this is just based on playing more hours, but I think I've just kind of gotten used to bet sizes where we're going to get to an all-in size on the river. So I think I just kind of like I didn't consciously pick this hand to set up a jam on the river. I just kind of just based on I guess patterns, pick that bet size, knowing we'd be at like one SPR on river.
I mean, it's kind of hard to shape this hand like you're gonna. I mean, who knows if both these guys call? So you're saying if the button calls and then the other guy folds, you're actually you're setting this up for a jam against the button.
Against the button, I'm probably checking because
On the river.
on the river, yeah, just because I'm running out of value. I'd have to just try and pick off a bluff from missed hearts or a missed straight draw, because I think what you said, like queen 10 doesn't go call call jam itself, probably goes
Mhm.
call call check. Ace queen probably goes call call check. So um,
Okay,
if the button had called here, I would have actually frozen up just a little bit because he was definitely pretty passive.
so you go 225. Okay.
Button folds and
Okay.
the under the gun player calls.
Okay. So that makes sense with what you're saying. So button folds under the gun calls. So you put another 450 in, and now it looks like it's 725. 725, and you guys have like what, 750 to 800 left, something like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So now you're heads up against the under the gun caller, just the under the gun who was your initial raiser, just to recap for the podcast. 1.1k effective, 8-handed under the gun, 20, low jack calls, hero over calls, king queen off, button calls. Flop is queen of hearts, jack of clubs, 5 of hearts, check, hero 65, button calls, under the gun, over calls. Other guy gets out of the way, turns the deuce of hearts under the gun, checks. Hero goes large 225. Button folds under the gun, check calls again. It's quite interesting because now you start to think like, is he checking like ace queen, kings, or aces? You know, something like that. Like, what is he really? Is he going to check call here to 225 with ace king? I mean, obviously, if the button called and then under the gun overcalled, that would, way skew his hand more towards something that was stronger, that was just playing defensively. But now that the button's out of there, he might just think like you're full of it once in a while and be calling you with like ace king, ace 10 or something like that, or a jack with no heart in it. But again, he did overcall the flop, so
It's tough for me to think ace king calls again, mostly because he has to be concerned with either his ace or his king giving me two pair. So he may just be drawing to a gutter if he doesn't have hearts.
well,
So
I wouldn't. I mean, if I was in this guy's spot and I got to the turn this way, where okay, I didn't see bet ace king, I overcalled to try to like hit my gut shot, maybe see some free cards. Right now on the turn, you kind of. I mean, it's not polarizing. I mean, you go 2/3. Now the other guy gets out of the way. I could sometimes see calling ace king here, no heart, with a little bit of equity, but then also the chance that you might be bluffing, like a hand like king 10, of course, which we block, or some sort of hearts or something like that you might just give up with. So, like I said, when the button's out of there, I
sure.
think he starts to get a little bit wider. But okay, 725 to the river.
River's another pretty big brick. We get the six of clubs.
Okay.
And he checks. He does not lead.
Well, I gotta say, different from last hand here, Graham. Again, the hand that we did before, a guy kind of chickened out with ace jack and a 3-bet pot on a jack high board multi-way. I think this one plays out a little bit differently where, like I said, if I put myself in a spot where I somehow had ace king on the turn and I'm the preflop raiser and I called with maybe, bluff catching on turn, but with some equity, and then we get to a brick river and then I check to you again and then you bet again, even though a lot of players, don't bet a hand as obviously weak as king queen here on the river. It might be pretty close though for me because I might have been like sort of playing a little Fifth Street chicken and just kind of check calling to, hope that it goes check or pick up one of my cards that give me some equity. And then if you were to bet again here, it would be awfully close. It would be hard. I don't know if I would be doing a lot of calling with a non-paired hand. So if I'm not calling with a non-paired hand, then like we're sort of left with, what does he have? Now you block pocket kings. We don't see ace really. We don't really see ace played in this manner all that much. And he can have some ace queen. He did overcall the flop. So he's not really supposed to have ace jack, no hearts here. And even if he has ace jack of hearts somehow, right? Or jack X of hearts somehow, that's even worse for him to bluff catch you with because he blocks the front door hearts, right? Say he had like king jack of hearts, right? Where there's less combos.
Yeah, him having hearts here is bad.
Right. So, and that's a lot of the jack X that he might get here with the jack X of hearts. So, I mean, listen, like if you want to improve your win rate in a lot of live poker, you want to get into situations like what we call like depolarize the river. You could call it like a merge or whatever. That was another term that I defined recently, like a merge. I mean, I guess a merge can sort of be depolarized. I just don't know if this is the spot that I'm doing it here with, because I don't know if ace king calls you here at the end. And I feel like sometimes he's going to have like ace queen here or some sort of overpair. But you'd be surprised, you get into a situation like this. Like if the entire hand was heads up, where there weren't these other people in here, and he check called the flop and he check called the turn, I would bet the river for value. I would, if it was entirely heads up. Multi-way, I think is a little bit different.
Right.
So
I had some of those similar thoughts. I was sitting here, and in my opinion, it's tough to go like 300 here, because then you probably just have to call the all in for 500 more. So in my mind, I was thinking jam is probably the only size.
Now, let me just say something. I want to just pick a comment here from our coach Nate, who says good players will level themselves into a call with a jack because it blocks thick value from the hero. I agree with that, but the one thing that's different about this hand, though, is that it was multi-way, and the under the gun is supposedly a good player, and the button called the flop bet. That's why I keep going back to, like, if it was heads up, sure. If it went check, call, sure. Sure, a jack might call here at the end. But it's different when it was, you're betting into three people, number one, right, on the flop, which really should tend to be, I would skew towards top pair of a draw, as opposed to like some sort of protection bet that you probably aren't going to have. And then the button called. So like this guy's not supposed to overcall with like a jack here, no hearts, really, on the flop. So that's my real that's the real key to the hand rating here. Okay, so under the gun checks, and what did we do here?
You kind of already brought it up, but I pretty much thought, just based on the dynamic he and I have, I think we both have a pretty good level of respect for our games. Hearts miss, King 10 misses, 10-9 misses. So I did think if he got here with a queen like Queen 10 or got here with a jack, he would consider calling down. I definitely thought it was really thin in real time, but I decided to jam.
For
about 780.
All right, so I mean, this is the definition of depolarizing. I mean, you are trying to make it look like you have two pair plus here, right? Or a busted draw.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was pretty much my logic. I mean, I think King Queen's probably the worst hand you can do this with, and I was definitely aware of the fact he could show up with Ace Queen here. I faded the snap call, so I don't think
that's
Ace
good
Queen
that you
snaps,
fade the snap call, because there's less of a chance he's got kings, and if he played aces this way, I think he probably will snap call, right?
I'm inclined to agree, especially aces no heart. I think he just kind of has to, shrug and pay me. Yeah, so he thinks about it. Eventually, he puts in the call. I turn over my hand, and it's a pretty good feeling for him to kind of look at my hand, and be surprised and say, "Wow, you went really thin." And he shows the jack of hearts, and he mucks.
He shows the jack of hearts. Interesting. Well, that's nicely played. I mean, the fact that he shows the jack of hearts should, I'm going to keep harping on it. It really should be the jack X of hearts, which if he has jack 10 of hearts or king jack of hearts, it's going to be one of the worst hands to.
After the hand, he said he put me on hearts. So, maybe just, but, jack 10 off probably doesn't open that early. So maybe ace jack, king jack, ace jack probably makes the most sense. But
like ace jack off, you mean, or something?
Yeah, ace jack off, no ace of hearts.
Yeah.
But it's pretty good feeling.
I don't like that. I don't like that overcall. You bet you went 2/3 on flop 65 and 80 button calls. Ace jack off should fold there. Maybe you could say maybe ace jack with the ace of hearts maybe continues, but I don't call there with ace jack versus who I think is a good player, and then a button call on the flop I'm talking about. But thanks for the call, Graham. I appreciate it.